But if you go to a farmer's market every week, you're like, yeah, I need some like fresh vegetables. I need to get that sourdough loaf again because it blew my mind. Like that kind of stuff. You have a very specific, idea of what you want to get instead of like, I'm at Comic-Con, where can I spend my money? It's a very, very different thing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Booth. I'm Jade, and with me, as always, is my award-winning producer, Heather.
And on this channel, we talk about wild stories from Comic-Con vendors because Jade has her own booth, she made her own product, and she goes to a lot of Comic-Cons and sells all of her stuff. And which is funny because today we're not actually talking about Comic-Cons because there are a lot of events that you can do stuff like this at, and including farmers markets and what are the other ones called? Like craft fairs, art fairs, whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
things
tell
like
us
that.
about that, Jade, because it's a completely different ball game. We mostly talk about Comic Cons, but these are very different.
It is. When I think of farmers markets, art shows, things like that, we're just going to call them events, like small events like that. Um, you want to think of them as if you're going camping. And I say this because they provide you with nothing.
Mm,
So when you do things like Comic-Con, you're guaranteed with your fees that you get a table, you get a roof over your head and internet and security and a guaranteed amount of people that are going to be there. With farmers markets, you don't have any of that. And then you also have to provide not only your own table and tablecloths and tents, but you have to fulfill certain regulations, such as you have to have 50 pounds of weight on each one of your tent poles. If you use what I use, which is like a little dome that I found online, it's adorable and it's one that you kind of fold up. You're like, those like beach floaties that you can fold like this and they become a circle. It's like that, and you throw it, and then I get inside of it like a ferret, and I open it up, and it really is cute. So I have something like that, but I'm required by law to have sandbags on each what they would call corner of an octagon. It's either, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's an octagon. It looks like a big stop sign with a lid. It's really cute. I have to
oh
have
my
one of those.
gosh.
And the reason I say have to is that a lot of these events, the fire marshal will stop by and they will 100% shut you down if you're not in compliance. And I know, at least in Colorado, our outdoor events, because we get those big gusts of wind, we have to comply with that stuff because
Yeah.
it's a safety issue for not only the other vendors, but the participants and yourself. So there's things like that if you don't have your business license on you for that specific city. So in the city that I live in, which is a suburb of Denver, I'm licensed here to sell my goods. But in other smaller cities, I might have to get licensed in that city for either the year or that month to be
Hmm.
able to sell in that place. And you find this a lot with food trucks. They're actually, if you want to know how that works, talk to a food truck owner because they have licenses for like everywhere that they service because it's required. Even in some of the Comic Con conventions I've done, like New Orleans, they had a representative from the Chamber of Commerce and the tax. I hate to call them the tax people, but basically the county tax assessor people were there and they had you buy a license from them on day one. When you go to check in, I had to pay $50 for a license. And then I had to fill out my tax form on my projected numbers, which, by the way, math wise was really stressful because
Yeah.
A, I don't want to accidentally commit tax fraud. And B, you never know in a show how the show's going to go. So
Yeah.
when you say, like, I might sell maybe $3,000 worth of product, I had to pay my taxes up front. So, and then they said if it's different, then you need to come back on the last day between this time and this time, which, by the way, they did it between 12 and 2. That's in the middle of our work day.
Right?
So I don't
Like
know why they
that's
did that.
insane. Well, and also keep in
Yeah.
mind, like they're bringing this stuff to you, but that's at a convention. Like at a farmer's
Yeah.
market, at a craft fair, you kind of have to figure this all out on your own, don't you? Do they have
Yes, you
anybody
do.
there that you can even ask questions? Like, my gosh.
So sometimes you get lucky. They'll have people from the various county offices that will come in and come talk to you. And so while you're setting up, this one person's so nice. She comes by and she says, "Hey, I'm here on behalf of the state of Colorado. You're in this district. Make sure you're collecting taxes on this amount." And she'll have like a little card that she hands you that tells you the information. And then it has a web address where you go and pay the taxes online.
Mhm.
And they just hand that to you, and they're super, super helpful. And it has their information on the back. So if you have questions, like a lot of us do, unless you get accidentally married like me and you marry somebody who's really good at tax law and taxes and things like that.
That's a whole
But
other
this small,
story.
yeah, it is. But this like this small thing with the taxes, you might only pay maybe 20, 25, $100 in taxes, for these events, but obviously the more money you make, the more you have to pay in taxes. So that's a whole nother thing. But at least they're there to tell you at some of these events, but don't count on it. I know the city of Boulder has never come out and helped us with that. It's only been the cities outside of Denver that we've had help with. So
Good Lord.
yeah, so think camping and money and taxes. You don't generally have internet. So you have to use your data off of your phone if you're doing any kind of Square or Clover transactions or whatever system you're using. Um, the other thing that's kind of tricksy is there's usually not bathrooms. These events are often held in parking lots or at parks, and they may not have any type of bathroom. Now, some of the events that are larger, when I say larger, we're thinking like a couple thousand people. The city or somebody will bring in like the porta potties and things like that, and you can go pee there. But don't count on a place to pee.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places to get food. You might have a food truck, you might not. They may not want to show up that day and they may not stay for the day. So you have to bring like your own waters and trail mix and food, lunch, packed things. Whereas at a convention, there's food. It may not be great food, but you can go and get something. You know that there is a bathroom. One of the benefits of going to the convention centers is that people pay to come in and there's security. And so you know that none of the weapons are real. You know that the people that got in had to go through, some type of security checkpoint and they're there to buy stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
at these outdoor art events and things like that, anybody off the street can walk up. So, you don't have the same protection. There typically isn't any type of security or police presence of any kind there. So if something happens, like if someone has a heart attack or something, there's not immediate response. You have to
Yeah.
call and hopefully remember the address that you're at and things like that. Like, your own home address if something happens at your home. But if something happens at like a park, you're like, oh my God, what park am I at? Like you have
Right?
to
Like,
remember
what are
that.
even the cross streets? I don't even know.
Yeah, like, so you need to know that stuff and be aware of that stuff that you wouldn't think of at a convention. So there's a lot of pre-thought that goes into these,
Yeah.
as well as like at conventions, we're pretty accustomed to carrying all our stuff. But now you have to think about carrying your tent. You have to carry your own table. You have to have a chair. And by the way, get a comfortable chair. I have like this massive, like hunter gatherer giant chair that has the big ass scoop for you that like hammocks your ass
Oh,
and it has like little pockets everywhere. I got one of those and it's super lightweight because I have to carry all this stuff myself. And Heather, we were talking about those things the other day that you see people at the zoo with where they stick their children in it and drag it behind them.
yeah, those like they're like foldable carts. They like you
Yeah,
like fold
like
it
a
out and
wagon.
then you can take everything with
Yeah,
you, but you can also
yeah.
like fold it and put it in your car. Those are so
I
nice.
highly recommend getting one of those if you can afford one. Because a lot of times we're discouraged from parking anywhere near what we would call a drop off point and anywhere near the parking lot for customers because we want the customers to be able to park closely and, go shop and then come back and leave. So we have to park way the hell in the middle of nowhere and then drag all our stuff.
Yeah.
So that's always a factor when we're talking about having to set up. Now, some people drag their spouses along, which I think sometimes I get like moody about because I don't think their spouse wants to be there and they're talking to them like they work for them. I'm like, that's your person. You should be polite. But whatever, we won't get into that, like that
You
gender
don't know
equality.
everybody's dynamics.
But it is, it's dynamics. And then it just makes you sad. But I do all this myself. And so it has to be things that I can carry. It has to be things that I can drag to my spot. And your spot's typically, 10 by 10. And with the farmers market and art show crowd people are very different than what you get at Comic-Con.
How
I
so?
don't have I don't have a high opinion of them. And it's
Ooh.
only because I've done hundreds of these. And I kind of find the same people at the thing. Now, I hate to stereotype anybody. With this particular situation, you tend to find the farmers market people are very competitive and curt because they have this idea, there's a mentality around the area that people either spend money with you or other vendors are taking money from you.
Oh, good
And
lord.
that mentality doesn't work for me because people, yes, have a finite amount of money they want to spend at something, but that might be divided into multiple categories. If you go to a farmer's market, you might be there to buy candles and some squash and maybe, a frame or a gift for somebody. So people have already kind of divided in their heads. So the fact that they're shopping at multiple booths does not mean, oh, well, the candle person just took $25 away from me. That's not really how it works, but they have this mentality like that. And they
Yeah.
tend to be very, at least in my experience, very territorial and aggressive. My
Yeah.
booth doesn't take out much space, and so when they see there's extra space, they'll immediately try to encroach on it and take it, or
Yeah.
make spaces where their customers can get into my area to look at their stuff. Because
Yeah.
it's like these people bring entire shops, it seems like. Like, my stuff is so compact. Like, they literally bring an entire, it seems like, curio shop, right? And in the space, and they don't have enough room. So it can be very hostile, I think is the word I'm looking for, which is unfortunate because there is room for everybody, and,
Yeah. Well,
I'm
and if
not
you
gonna
think
say that
about it,
Comic-Con is
like
more. What?
if you think about it, like farmers markets are generally like every week for, like in my town, it's every week from November to April, like every Saturday. And so a Comic-Con, is like an event in that area once a year. And so people
Yeah.
come and they just like bring money. They're like, I don't know what I'm going to spend it on. But if you go to a farmers market every week, you're like, yeah, I need some like fresh vegetables. I need to get that sourdough loaf again because it blew my mind. Like that kind of stuff. You have a very specific idea of what you want to get instead of like, I'm at Comic-Con, where can I spend my money? It's a very,
Yeah.
very different thing. Yeah, so just keep that in mind that, it don't have that kind of like outlook of they're taking money away from me. Just realize that the
Yeah.
the people there are different. The customers there are very different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, you have to make your own change. There's no ATMs or anything like that. And so I always try to make friends with my neighbors. We've talked about this before, but especially at the farmers markets, because you never know what you might need or what you can trade them for. I do find that a lot of farmers market people will come up to you and say, "Oh, what do you sell?" And you'll be like, "Oh, I do this." Like, "Cool. Come on my booth. I have this." Or do you trade or things like that? And they tend to buy a lot from each other, not as much selling to the general public, in my opinion.
Mhm.
It's not a big deal. I mean, if it's something you wanna try, farmers markets are super inexpensive to attend compared to Comic-Con. Like, one of the ones that I have signed up for here, it's $25 a day. Now, keep in mind, it is outdoors. We are expected to market it ourselves. They don't really do their own marketing. And they're, typically by a busy street, so you're counting on a lot of people driving by and stopping versus it being announced like Heather said for a year and people are counting on it and know about it. But compared to a Comic-Con booth that averaged maybe 375 for the weekend, it's a huge difference, but you're gonna
Yeah.
get just a different crowd, different volume of people, and like I said, with farmers markets, there's no guarantee on volume of people that you're going to interact with and see.
Yeah.
So, I don't wanna discourage anyone from doing it. Obviously, I just said that I signed up for several, and I tend to do when it comes to farmers markets, I tend to do their holiday ones. So, I've done a few
Yeah.
Halloween ones, up to this
Gift
point.
gift giving
I'm doing
time.
several Christmas holiday ones as well and a few New Year's ones. So, and they're brackets and people like because these are the seasonal one, it's something they've had going on for the past 19 years. So most people in the area be like, "Oh yeah, I live in Thornton and I know that there's the Noel Fest and that's usually the first weekend of November or whatever it happens to be." And so they can kinda know that
Mhm.
that's going on, and then if the city puts it on, I like to do the city events if possible because they have the money and the ability to market it. You see it on posters and banners and advertised on radio and things like that. The smaller ones they don't tend to, have that type of leverage
Mhm.
to market it. So it's just a very different world. So my top tips for you is to, if you can, visit the farmer's market before you apply for it. See what it looks like, see the location, see who attends, and see if it's even something that you're interested in. Also, see if there are other people selling the same thing you are and if that's gonna be a conflict of interest for the farmer's market or not.
Mhm.
When you go to Comic-Con, you might see 15 people selling jewelry, but it's out of 10,000 vendors, and so
Yeah.
they're typically kinda spread out, and you don't always have the same type of stuff. I literally was at a farmer's market where a woman sold high-end silver jewelry. I sell these tiny little glow in the dark candy beads. And I was told by the coordinator I could not have my candy beads on my thing because it was a type of jewelry. They are nowhere near the same, but because they have a
Weird.
no conflict or no what is it? Non-compete, I think is the word I'm looking for.
I think you're,
They have a
yeah,
non-compete
yeah,
within who's selling stuff. And so they're like, "Yeah, you can't sell that." I was like, "Okay." So I just pulled them off my table because I don't wanna argue with them, it's their
yeah.
event. I never argue with people at these events if at all possible, because A, conflict sucks, and B, it's like going to someone else's house and being like, "Well, at my house, I put my dirty shoes on my couch, so I should be able to do that here." Like, no, it's not your
Right?
house. It's not your event.
This isn't up to you.
So yeah, this isn't up to you. So, and we've seen so many people argue. It's so funny for us because we see them arguing over the stupidest things, and we're like, just go with it or
Really?
negotiate, you know?
Right?
So, so there's that. So make sure you look at it and see if there's other people. Talk to the vendors there too and say, "Hey, how do you like this event? I'm thinking of vending." Most of them are very friendly. Most of them will be like, "Oh yeah, I come out every Saturday. I always take home between $300 and $500. I was able to quit my job." You know, they'll tell you nice stories, and we always want people in front of our booths talking to us because it makes us look popular and it makes
Yeah.
us look like we have something. So they'll talk your
Even
ear
if they're
off.
not selling,
Um,
I mean, even if they're not
yeah.
buying your stuff, just like be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I have people here.
Yay, people love me. The next thing is try to find at the very least a folding table and a chair. You can get away with a lot if you put your stuff in a suitcase and you get a folding table from a local box store and a comfy chair. You don't have to have a tent for outdoor events. It just makes you look like you have a shop. It gives the appearance of an actual market, like what we think about when you think of like Lord of the Rings and stuff. Like, ooh, it's like a market. But you don't have to. And there's no regulation that forces you unless they say in the contract, and they will have contracts. So read those. They'll say things like, hey, you must have a tent and you
Yeah,
must have weights and you must have insurance and you must. They'll have all these lists of things for you to do.
yeah,
Some places will actually have you prove that you have insurance. Um, Out here, I think you have to have about 1,000,000 in
yeah.
coverage or something like that. Now, when you hear that stuff, you guys, because I know the first time I heard it with insurance, I was like, "Oh my god, I have to have $1,000,000 in my bank account?" Like, that's not what it means at all. And talk to an insurance person. But when I first started, I was like, "Oh my god, I don't have $1,000,000. If I had $1,000,000, why am I selling, like, at a farmer's
Why
market?"
would I be doing this?
Um yeah, so and it's just liability, so that way in case your stuff, gets blown into another person's stuff and breaks their stuff, or if something flies off and hits somebody in the eye, like, this is all that coverage stuff that your insurance people can tell you, so go talk to them. But farmers markets will require you to have the weights and show that you have insurance, show that you have, your right to sell in that particular county or city. They're very checklisty, and they also sometimes will have hidden fees. So when you look at your contract, check for those. And when I say hidden fees, what I mean are things like if you pack up early, all your future applications or events will be canceled
Mhm.
because it looks bad for the rest of us. And believe me, I get it. I've been at farmers markets where there was nothing that happened all day. I made maybe one sale. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm supposed to be there till 7, and I don't want to stay. But it's a thing that you should stay for, if nothing else, for the other people around you.
Bring a book.
Some places will fine you if you leave early, or they'll just reject your applications. You'll get blacklisted, or let's say you did what I did, where you sign up for multiples, they'll cancel those contracts with you because in
Yeah.
the contract it'll say we can cancel for any reason, and then you lose your money. They won't refund you. So just be aware of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I can't say this enough, but plan for everything. Bring water, bring food, bring first aid, know your locations so that way if you have to call for help, you can. Like, I don't wanna make it sound like it's dangerous, there's just a lot more on you at a
Mhm.
farmer's market than it is at a convention.
And so that's kind of the like toss up. Like either you're going to pay more for a booth at a
Mhm,
convention, but then you have all that security, you have food, you have a bathroom, you have all kinds of stuff easily accessible to you, that you have the table, like you have a setup, or you can spend a lot less money at a farmer's market and, especially depending on your demographic, it might not do
mhm.
as well, but like
Yeah,
you're going to spend less money, but then you have to have all those things in your head, which if this is already kind of stressing you out, might not be the best idea. But
Yeah.
it also could be like a good way to dip your toe in the water because, like she said, just bring a chair and a table. You can get away with a lot, unless, of course, they say specifically that you need to bring a tent. Like, you can get away with just bringing those few things, like,
Yeah.
and you could just try it and just see how it goes. And it will be a lot less like gut wrenching when you're like, well, I spent $500 on a table and didn't make any sales, instead of like, oh, I spent $25 that day and I bought a $30 table. Like, and then you're like, it's all right. It's not as much of a gut punch.
Yeah. So if you're starting small and you want to dip your toe, absolutely check out farmers markets. If you are wanting to do conventions but are afraid to drop that big money, sometimes there's small local conventions that you can start with and do. And if you really are ready to jump, jump into a big convention and see what it's like. If nothing else, you can say you tried it at one point, and it's a great experience. No matter which one you choose, you will learn something, and I promise you that. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and a very special thank you to Nerdy Girl Podcast for producing this episode. We'll see you next time.